Oh, it hurt you. You called us.
Okay.
What took you so long to answer the door?
Oh, I was trying to put on some clothes, sir.
You doing all right mentally?
Yes.
Sure?
My medicine and stuff.
All right.
During the pre-dawn hours one morning in July of 2024, 36-year-old Sonia Massey dialed 911 to report a suspected prowler outside her Springfield, Illinois home. Sangamon County deputies found an SUV with smashed windows in her driveway and knocked on the door for 3 minutes before she answered. Upon answering the door, Massey said she needed help and that she didn't know who the SUV belonged to. When the responding deputies asked her what she needed help with, she was unable to explain beyond saying that she heard someone outside. They reassured Massey that they had searched the area and didn't find anyone, then asked her if her mental health was doing okay. Inside the home, 30-year-old Deputy Sean Grayson reminded Massey that she had a pot of hot water on her stove. After removing the pot from the stove, Massey could be heard saying, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." Fearing that the seemingly disturbed woman was going to douse him with boiling water, Grayson backed away from the kitchen area, pointed his handgun at Massey, threatened to shoot her in the face and ordered her to drop the pot. Massey immediately apologized, raised her hands away from the pot and ducked, but Grayson opened fire on her. She was shot in the head and died at the scene. Grayson is facing 3 first-degree murder charges in connection with Massey's death, along with 1 count each of misconduct and aggravated assault with a firearm. The disgraced former deputy remains held without bail and is currently awaiting his arraignment, which is scheduled for late August. Since Grayson's arrest, disturbing discoveries about his work history have come to light. He has no documented history of excessive force, but he worked for 6 different law enforcement agencies in the 4 years leading up to Massey's death. He was also discharged from the Army for serious misconduct, which military officials have refused to comment on the nature of. The outcome of his current case remains to be seen. Number 16. Miles Bryant. Susana Morales vanished in July of 2022 while walking home from a friend's house in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Shortly after, the teen texted her mother at 9:40 p.m. to say that she was on her way home. Her loved ones received a live 360 alert about a possible car crash and a sudden change in direction at high speed. Her phone stopped pinging less than an hour later and she was never heard from again. Authorities initially revealed limited details about what they thought had happened to Morales, but said that they were treating the case as a homicide and that they believed she was killed sometime between 10 p.m. that night and 2 a.m. the following morning. In February 2023, more than 6 months after the young woman vanished, her remains were found in a remote wooded area roughly 20 miles, 32.2 kilometers from her last known whereabouts. A gun belonging to 22-year-old Doraville police officer Miles Bryant was found near her body. Bryant had reported a weapon stolen on the day of Susana's disappearance, but the discovery of the gun nevertheless raised suspicions that he was involved in the teen's murder, especially since he had been working at the apartment complex that Morales was walking home from on the night of her murder. Cell phone records, surveillance footage, and other evidence continued to stack up against him, and he was charged with murder. When the case went to trial in 2024, Bryant admitted that Morales had been in his car with him on the night of her death and that he had lied about his gun being stolen, claiming that he had lost it in the woods and was worried about getting in trouble at his job. The defense also took advantage of the medical examiner's inability to determine the cause of death due to the highly decomposed state of the victim's remains, arguing that Morales may have died from a drug overdose. Despite these attempts to poke holes in the case, the jury found Bryant guilty of malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping, and false report of a crime. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Number 15. Beau Lamar Condos. 26-year-old TV host Jesse Beard and his boyfriend, 29-year-old Qantas flight attendant Luke Davis, vanished from a home in the suburb of Paddington in February of 2024. Based on the evidence, investigators concluded that the couple had likely been murdered. They identified Beard's ex-boyfriend, New South Wales Senior Constable Beau Lamar Condos, as the prime suspect in the case. After questioning Lamar Condos, police charged him with 2 counts of murder. A few days later, the victims' bodies were found inside surfboard bags on a rural property in Bungonia. Beard and Davis had both been shot in what prosecutors are describing as a domestic violence-related double homicide? Prosecutors claim that Lamar Condos targeted Beard in a months-long campaign of predatory behavior leading up to the murders. The accused killer was fired from the police force shortly after his arrest and remains held without bail amid the ongoing case. According to the most recent available updates on the case, Lamar Condos has yet to enter a plea to the charges, and he may plan to use a mental health-related defense when the case goes to trial. Number 14. Roy Oliver. Late one night in April of 2017, police in Bulk Springs, Texas, responded to a report of underage drinking at a house party with an estimated 100 people present. Officers arrived at the scene right as partygoers overheard gunshots and fled in a panic. Amid the chaos, Officer Roy Oliver fired 3 rounds into a car full of teenagers, fatally striking Jordan Edwards in the head. Police initially claimed that the car was reversing aggressively toward the responding officers when Oliver opened fire, but body cam footage proved that the opposite was true. The car was driving away from the scene when the deadly shots were fired, and Oliver's use of force was deemed unreasonable. He was fired from his job and subsequently charged with murder. Oliver maintained his innocence, claiming during his trial that he shot at the car because it was about to strike his partner, Tyler Gross, who testified during the trial that he did not feel like he was in danger at the time of the shooting. In August of 2018, the jury found Oliver guilty, making him the first on-duty officer to be convicted in a shooting death in Texas in more than 40 years. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, and his attempts to appeal the case have been unsuccessful. Number 13. Jason Cunningham. Early one morning in June of 2020, 37-year-old mother of 3, Nicole Harrington, was found dead with gunshot wounds in a parking garage elevator in Augusta, Georgia. She had been killed more than 10 hours earlier and left there overnight. At the time of Harrington's death, she was seeing 2 men, including a 48-year-old married former sheriff's deputy named Jason Moose William Cunningham. Shortly after the discovery of the victim's body, Cunningham called a detective and confessed to shooting Harrington during a heated argument. He claimed that he had met up with Harrington to end their affair and that he lost his temper and pulled the trigger when she insulted the size of his manhood. Cunningham was arrested following an 8-hour standoff and has remained in custody ever since. According to prosecutors, he was living a double life that began at least 2 years earlier when he resigned from his job in law enforcement after failing a drug test. Harrington was reportedly unaware that the former deputy was married. In 2023, he pleaded guilty to a malice murder charge, landing him behind bars for life with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Number 12. Tim Dean. 28-year-old Joshua Niles and his girlfriend, 24-year-old Amber Washburn, were mercilessly gunned down in the driveway of their Sodus, New York home in October 2018. The double homicide was traced to Joshua's ex-girlfriend, 25-year-old Charlene Childers, and her husband, 32-year-old Timothy Dean, who worked as the police chief in the small town of Sunray, Texas. A few months earlier, Childers had lost custody of the 2 children she shared with Niles. The kids had moved in with Niles and Washburn, and Childers was determined to get them back at any cost. At her urging, Dean drove to New York in a rental car with plans to kill her ex while she stayed behind in Texas. When Dean arrived at the residence, he put a mask on and approached Niles in his driveway. A brief argument ensued between the men before Dean pulled the gun and fired 10 shots, killing Niles at the scene. Dean had no plans to kill Amber Washburn, but she arrived home before he could flee the scene, so he shot her to eliminate her as a witness. Both Dean and Childers were charged with murder. Childers pleaded guilty to manslaughter and received a 28-year prison sentence, while Dean was found guilty of 6 felonies, including first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without parole. Authorities also charged a 3rd suspect, Bron Boller, who formerly worked under Dean as a police officer. He was convicted of conspiracy for letting Dean use his credit card for the rental car and was paroled in 2020 after serving a 1 to 3 year prison sentence. Number 11. David Griffin. In what one police chief described as a deeply troubling situation, a 48-year-old Florida police officer named David Griffin was arrested in connection with multiple thefts from Walmart in December of 2023. Griffin was employed with the Haines City Police Department when he was nabbed off duty at a Walmart store in Mulberry alongside a 28-year-old female suspect named Shelby DuBose. According to the Polk County Sheriff's Office, deputies were called to the scene after an employee saw Griffin and DeBose placing unpaid merchandise into bags at the self-checkout. The employee corrected the pair by showing them how to properly scan the items, but the suspects allegedly continued to place unscanned merchandise into bags after the worker walked away. Security stopped the pair as they tried leaving the store and found $343 worth of items that had not been paid for, along with around $200 worth of paid items. Further investigation connected Griffin's debit card to at least 4 other recent thefts, and he was charged with 5 counts of retail petty theft. DeBose was connected to 3 of the previous thefts and was charged accordingly. Griffin immediately resigned from the police department following his arrest. Records show that he pleaded nolo contendere, or no contest, to 4 of the theft charges. Number 10. Fel Sonat. In 2023, the FBI received a tip that 40-year-old Miami police officer Fel Sonat was stealing money and drugs from suspects during traffic stops. Posing as habitual criminals, undercover agents inserted themselves into the scheme and captured audio and video recordings of Sonat pulling over people who he believed had just bought or sold drugs. According to investigators, Sonat wore his uniform and used his official police vehicle while conducting the stops, but operated outside his jurisdiction while off duty to avoid being tracked by his superiors. Authorities accused him of offering to spare suspects from jail in exchange for handing over their cash and drugs during one such traffic stop. Sonat identified himself as Officer Martez. Unaware that he was interacting with an undercover agent, he accepted a backpack filled with $52,000 cash and let the driver go. He then provided a $13,000 cut to the person who had tipped him off to the suspected drug dealer and kept the rest of the money for himself. On another occasion, Sonat pulled over an undercover agent who he believed was transporting a large amount of money and cocaine. He identified himself as a Broward County deputy and seized the goods, then proceeded to a pre-arranged location to divvy up the proceeds with the person who had tipped him off to the goods. Much to his surprise, Sonat was met by federal agents who placed him under arrest on suspicion of violating the Hobbs Act extortion. He was charged with multiple crimes, including attempted extortion under color of official right, attempted possession of cocaine with the intent to distribute, and theft of government funds. In 2024, Sonat pleaded guilty to 2 charges as part of a plea agreement and was sentenced to more than 11 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Number 9. Zachary Gautier. In April of 2022, 31-year-old Vermont State Police Detective Zachary Gautier was charged with several misdemeanors for violating an abuse prevention order, injuring a dog, and lying in court about a car crash. Under the abuse prevention order, Gautier had been banned from contacting a woman he had abused and threatened. He was arrested after investigators found evidence to back the victim's claims that he had continued contacting her despite the order. The animal abuse charge stemmed from an incident that occurred in December of 2021, when the woman, who had a restraining order against Gautier, accused him of punching a puppy in the head for defecating indoors. He struck the dog so hard that he broke his knuckle and went to the emergency room. Gautier initially told his superiors at work that he had hurt his hand while running outside to grab a water bottle. In court, he claimed that he injured his knuckle by falling on an icy driveway after taking the dog outside to go to the bathroom. He eventually admitted to striking the dog, but claimed that he didn't hit the pet very hard. The female victim also accused Gautier of crashing his truck into a ledge, causing a 6-pack of beer to explode inside the vehicle. Gautier denied drinking and driving, claiming that the beer belonged to a friend. After being presented with the restraining order, he repeatedly text messaged the victim, asking her to drop it. The victim claimed that she had tried to raise the alarm on Gautier's abuse long before any meaningful action was taken, but that her complaint to the Vermont State Police went largely overlooked. She accused Gautier of using his job as a state trooper as leverage to get what he wants from people. In June of 2023, Gautier pleaded guilty to 1 count each of violating an abuse prevention order, providing false information to a law enforcement officer, and violating the conditions of his pre-trial release. He received a 2-year suspended prison sentence, along with 2 years of probation, and is permanently banned from working in law enforcement. Number 8. Corrupt Coverup. Scottish call girl Emma Caldwell vanished in Glasgow in April of 2005 after arranging to meet a client. A month later, her body was found in a wooded area by a dog walker. She had been strangled to death. Several persons of interest were questioned, but no arrests were made until 17 years later, when a serial attacker named Ian Packer was charged with Caldwell's murder, along with over 40 additional charges, including 27 other victims. Packer, a known frequenter of prostitutes, had been questioned just weeks after the discovery of Caldwell's body, but had managed to fly under the radar until surviving victims raised the alarm on his troubling behavior. He was ultimately convicted of 33 charges involving 22 women, including Caldwell's murder, and is currently serving a life sentence with a minimum of 36 years. In 2024, the Sunday Mail published an expose claiming that multiple police officers had routinely indulged in the services of Caldwell and other escorts around the time of her murder. The disturbing findings fall in line with Packer's claims that law enforcement covered up his crimes out of a fear that he would expose their corrupt recreational activities. Multiple witnesses told investigative journalists that certain officers were regular clients of working girls. Some cops were accused of threatening to fine women unless they provided free services, and one former escort claimed that the police spent so much time in known prostitution areas that they would have certainly been familiar with Packer. To this day, there seems to be no other plausible explanation for why law enforcement waited so long to charge Packer, but no formal accusations have been brought against anyone involved in the investigation into Caldwell's death. Number 7. Richard Aguire. On a cold January night in 1986, a 27-year-old escort named Ruby Doss was found beaten and strangled to death in East Spokane, Washington. The case went cold for decades until DNA evidence led to the identification of a suspect in 2015. At the time of Doss's murder, 19-year-old Richard Aguire was stationed in the area with the U.S. Air Force. 2 years after the young woman's death, Aguire became a police officer for the city of Pasco, where he worked until his retirement in 2014. In 2016, authorities charged Aguire with Doss's murder, but the case was dropped due to a lack of evidence. 5 years later, in 2021, prosecutors decided to move forward with a murder case against Aguire. He maintained his innocence, and the trial ended in a hung jury. The state retried the case again in a bench trial in December of 2023. This time, the judge found 59-year-old Aguire guilty of first-degree murder. Because the crime had occurred nearly 40 years earlier, the judge had no choice but to sentence Aguire according to what the law would have allowed back in 1986, which was a 20 to 26-year range. The convicted killer was sentenced to 25 years behind bars. Number 6. Jeffrey Nelson. In late May of 2019, police officer Jeffrey Nelson responded to a complaint about a man harassing people and kicking things at a Dollar Tree store in Auburn, Washington. He was unable to locate the suspect, but received another call a short while later about a man throwing things and kicking and punching a red box DVD machine at a nearby Walgreens store. Nelson found the suspect, a 26-year-old homeless man named Jesse Saray, pacing back and forth and cursing to himself under a nearby collection of trees. Based on Saray's behavior, Nelson concluded that he was most likely high on drugs and preparing himself for a fight. The officer would later claim that he tried to de-escalate the situation by asking Saray if he was okay or if he needed medical attention. Saray responded in a hostile manner, according to Nelson, who told the obviously troubled man to stop acting aggressive in public. The suspect proceeded to act disruptive, prompting Nelson to place him under arrest for disorderly conduct. A physical struggle ensued between the two men as Saray resisted being taken into custody, resulting in Nelson's decision to fire 2 shots with his service weapon, fatally striking Saray in the abdomen and the forehead. Nelson claimed that he fired his gun in self-defense after Saray tried to steal it multiple times, but video footage showed Saray was on the ground and leaning away from Nelson after the first shot. A witness later told investigators that Nelson stopped to clear a jammed round before firing the second shot. This marked the 3rd time Nelson killed someone while on duty, following the shooting deaths of 2 other men in 2011 and 2017. He also had a troubling history of excessive force allegations stemming from non-fatal incidents, but was cleared of any wrongdoing in the 2 previous shootings and was kept on the force. Following Saray's death, he was charged with second-degree murder and first-degree assault. A jury found Nelson guilty as charged in June of 2024, following 3 days of deliberations. He's currently awaiting sentencing, which is scheduled for August. Number 5. Eric Duran. While conducting a buy and bust operation in the Bronx in August of 2023, undercover NYPD narcotics officers targeted 30-year-old Eric Dupree. As officers moved in to arrest Dupree, he began to drive away on a motorbike. 36-year-old Sergeant Eric Duran threw a cooler at him in an apparent attempt to stop him, causing the fleeing suspect to lose control of his bike. Dupré struck a tree and the car then fell off the bike as it toppled to the ground. He died at the scene, sparking a months-long investigation into the circumstances leading up to the deadly accident. Dupré's brother Ryan Rodriguez told a much different version of events than what was offered in the official account of what happened. He claimed that he and Dupré were hanging out when officers approached. Because Dupré had borrowed the bike from someone and knew it wasn't registered, he began driving away to avoid having it confiscated. Rodriguez accused Duran of smashing a large cooler in Dupré's face as he drove onto the sidewalk. Within days of the incident, Duran was suspended without pay. In January of 2024, he was charged with manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, and first and second degree assault. He pleaded not guilty and remains free on $15,000 bail while awaiting the outcome of the case. Number 4. Anthony Dstro. An altercation between an off-duty police officer and a fellow fast food patron at a Chick-fil-A restaurant in Summerville, South Carolina erupted into deadly violence in March of 24, ending with one man dead and another in jail. 64-year-old former Summerville officer Anthony Dstro shot 39-year-old Michael O'Neill during the disagreement, killing him at the scene, and is now facing murder and attempted kidnapping charges. While it's unclear what led up to the shooting, witnesses identified Dstro as the primary aggressor. One onlooker recalled seeing the two men exit their vehicles and approach one another on foot, while Dstro challenged O'Neill to a fight. An all-out brawl ensued while bystanders attempted to separate the men. At one point during the scuffle, Dstro flashed his police credentials and tried to arrest O'Neill, who could be seen trying to walk away from the situation. As a witness attempted to restrain Dstro, he allegedly threatened to shoot O'Neill if he left the scene. According to an arrest warrant, Dstro broke free from the person who was holding him back, then picked his gun up off the ground where it had fallen, ran up to O'Neill's vehicle and opened the passenger side door. O'Neill yelled at Dstro to get out of his car and began to drive away, at which point Dstro fired a single shot. During questioning, Dstro reportedly admitted that he saw no sign of O'Neill being in possession of a firearm or any other weapon. He also admitted that he was trying to stop the victim from leaving the scene when the fatal gunshot was fired. Despite these admissions, Dstro is maintaining his innocence from behind bars as he remains held without bail, pending the outcome of the case. Number 3. Tran. While responding to a late-night car crash in Voorhees, New Jersey in May of 2024, police found a 30-year-old man suffering from a gunshot wound. The other driver, later identified as 27-year-old off-duty NYPD officer Tran, had fled the scene. According to investigators, Tran fired a shot into the victim's truck at a red light, causing the victim to accelerate through the intersection and strike another car. Surveillance footage showed Tran's white SUV pulling up next to the victim's pickup truck in the moments leading up to the accident. The shooting victim is now a quadriplegic, and the woman driving the other car that got hit also suffered serious injuries. Police identified Tran as the suspect through surveillance footage, banking records, cell phone location data, and bullet casings at the crime scene, which were traced to the suspect's department-issued firearm. He was charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, and a gun possession count, and remains held without bail at the Camden County Jail. Tran has also been suspended from his job without pay, pending the outcome of the case. The nature of the disagreement leading up to the shooting has yet to be revealed. Today's topic was requested by The Noen and Mr. Diddy Kong. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Patrick Ferguson. 30-year-old Robert Lee Howard Jr. was reported missing in Memphis, Tennessee by his girlfriend in 2021. The woman told police that she had found Howard's phone by tracking its location, but Howard himself was nowhere to be found. Suspicion quickly fell on 29-year-old Memphis police officer Patrick Ferguson, whose ex-girlfriend had reportedly recently left him for Howard. Ferguson reportedly admitted to kidnapping Howard from his home at gunpoint while on duty and fatally shooting the victim in the back of his patrol car. The scorned cop also said he disposed of the body in one place but moved it to a second location with help from a friend. Howard's remains were recovered 4 days after he vanished. Ferguson was fired from his job and faces a laundry list of federal charges, including first-degree murder in perpetration of aggravated kidnapping, especially aggravated kidnapping, abuse of a corpse, and fabricating and tampering with evidence. He pleaded not guilty and remains held without bond amid the ongoing case. Authorities also charged 28-year-old Joshua Rogers, who's accused of helping Ferguson move Howard's body with accessory after the fact, abuse of a corpse, and fabricating and tampering with evidence. For those of you who haven't had your daily dose of They Will Kill You, stay tuned till after number 1 because we've got When Robbers Go Wrong lined up for you, if you haven't seen it yet. Number 1. Haron Dean. During the pre-dawn hours, one morning in October of 2019, police in Fort Worth, Texas, were called to the home of 28-year-old Atatiana Jefferson for a welfare check after someone noticed that her front door was wide open while walking through the backyard. Officer Haron Dean spotted movement through a window and ordered Jefferson to put her hands up, but he didn't give her any time to comply before firing a single fatal shot at the young woman. Investigators found that Dean had failed to identify himself as a police officer before he ordered Jefferson to show her hands. Jefferson's handgun was found near her body, leading to the speculation that she had mistaken Dean for an intruder. While it's unclear whether Dean saw the gun through the window, a second responding officer said that they could only see Jefferson's face and were unable to tell whether she was armed. Jefferson's nephew told detectives that his aunt had opened the front door to air out the house while cooking burgers. He said that Jefferson had grabbed her gun after hearing noise in the backyard and that she was holding the weapon at her side when she was shot. Jefferson owned the weapon legally and had a concealed carry permit, and because she didn't know Dean was a cop, she had every right to prepare for the possibility of having to defend herself. Dean resigned from the force 2 days after the shooting and was subsequently charged with murder. In December of 2022, a jury found him guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Number 8. Craig Cope. At around 3 a.m. on July the 31st of 2022, a gang of robbers pulled up alongside the Norco Market and Liquor in Norco, California. 80-year-old owner Craig Cope, who had been running the small business for 55 years, was the only one working inside at the time. He later remembered feeling like something was off from looking at the security cameras because the BMW SUV hadn't parked into the open spaces and backed in as it approached. One man then emerged from the vehicle and was caught by CCTV entering the store while announcing the robbery and aiming an AR-15 assault rifle at the owner. He never discharged his weapon, however, as Cope reacted quickly and opened fire on him with a shotgun, hitting him in the shoulder. Separate footage showed a second armed suspect preparing to enter the store when the gunshot rang out and his accomplice came out running while repeatedly screaming, "He shot my arm off!" The 4 robbers, all in their 20s, fled in a panic in the stolen SUV, with one of them nearly left behind. They were identified as Justin Johnson, Jamar Williams, and Davon Broadus, but the suspect that Cope had shot remained unnamed. He was taken to a Southern California hospital in critical condition where he was eventually stabilized. Deputies caught up with the suspects at the medical facility and took them into custody. In the incident's immediate aftermath, Cope suffered a minor heart attack as a result of the ordeal. He recovered at his Riverside home and stated an intention of returning to work as soon as possible, while his community and employees hailed him as a hero for standing up to the robbers. Number 7. Araceli Sotelo. Subway employee Araceli Sotelo was working alone at a franchise in Rockford, Illinois in the fall of 2021 when a masked robber walked in and held her at gunpoint, demanding cash. A physical altercation ensued behind the counter, with Sotelo repeatedly shouting at the robber to stop and leave. The fight then spilled into the dining area, where the woman eventually gained the upper hand and held the robber down by his hoodie. In the struggle, the latter dropped Sotelo's purse as well as his gun. Sotelo picked the weapon up and pointed it at the robber. She pistol whipped him on the side of his head with his own gun, but he was ultimately able to flee with her purse. Leaked surveillance footage of the altercation earned considerable attention online in the aftermath. Even though she'd fought off an armed robber and was left afraid to go home knowing he had her information, Sotelo faced punishment at work. On September the 9th of 2021, she uploaded the footage to her TikTok writing, "I was just suspended from my job after this incident." Sotelo explained that her employer had told her that she wouldn't work or be paid until every video of the fight was removed from the internet. which she speculated as management's attempt to keep the matter private from Subway's corporate entities. Sotelo denied having had any responsibility for the initial leak and argued on TikTok that she didn't have the ability to remove the videos from the internet. Sotelo's clip gained millions of views and many users voiced their support for the brave employee, while a Subway representative claimed that they were in contact with the local branch to better understand the situation. Number 6. California Smoke Shop Shootout. On April 3rd of 2022, a dramatic shootout took place at the smoke shop in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Compton. 4 men entered the store and within seconds one of them brandished a gun and held it just inches from an employee's face. The unnamed man, who was wearing a security vest, rapidly ducked from the line of fire and drew his own handgun from a belt holster. A fire exchange ensued as he ducked behind the glass counter. 2 robbers fell over each other as they scrambled to get away, and all 4 took cover behind a shelf by the door. Even though he was injured, outnumbered, and outgunned by 3 to 1, the brave employee continued to return fire against the robbers. After they fled the store and about 30 minutes after the gun battle, one of the men was dropped off at Martin Luther King Hospital, where he passed away from his wounds. A second suspect was arrested the following day, while 2 other men, identified as 21-year-old Keith Terrion Rachel and 23-year-old Kalel Malik Lundy, remained at large. In addition to a plethora of other legal repercussions, the surviving trio also faced a murder charge as they bore responsibility for the death of their unnamed accomplice. The smoke shop employee suffered gunshot injuries to his face and neck but was released following treatment at a local hospital. Number 5. Rite Aid Incident. In late October of 2022, an employee at a Rite Aid drugstore thwarted a brazen shoplifting attempt in a video-recorded incident that was picked up by multiple media outlets in the aftermath. The identities of those involved remained unspecified, as was the location where the attempted theft took place. A bearded man in a gray hoodie was filmed filling a blue bag with various items from the shelves, as a woman's voice was heard repeatedly asking off camera, "Are you for real?" The thief then tried to walk out of the store but was stopped by a worker. The 2 men came face to face with the latter, telling the former that he'll leave him alone if he dropped the bag, which he refused to do and kept trying to walk out. The employee then bear-hugged the would-be thief, swept his legs and slammed him to the floor. He then held his head down until he surrendered the stolen items and left the store. Number 4. Summer Tapasa Sataraka. A surveillance video went viral on Twitter in December of 2019 of a physical altercation at a Best Buy in Waimalu, Hawaii, involving an employee and a would-be shoplifter, 24-year-old Summer Tapasa Sataraka. Later revealed that she spotted the man steal a speaker from the store a few days prior when she was inside as a customer. Then, when the Best Buy worker was on the job, she saw him attempt to run out with another speaker and reportedly thought to herself, "Not today." She assumed a wide stance and repeatedly shoved him away from the exit. They both fell out of the camera's view as another worker intervened to separate them. After the suspected shoplifter was taken down and placed in what appeared to be a submission by the second employee, he clung to Tapasa Sataraka's shirt and pulled it over her head. The suspect eventually got back to his feet and Tapasa Sataraka walked him down until he left the store. She was terminated in the aftermath for violating the company's policy regarding shoplifting, but bore no ill will towards the retailer, as she'd expressed an intention of leaving prior to the altercation. Tapasa Sataraka reported that she'd never expected to become a viral sensation. She'd sent a copy of the surveillance footage to her sister, who shared it on Twitter, where it ultimately amassed millions of views. The clip caught the attention of Dana White, president of the UFC, the leading promotion in mixed martial arts. He flew Tapasa Sataraka out to Las Vegas, offered her front row seats for UFC 246, and subsequently hired her to work security for the promotion. Number 3. Princess Bride Diamond Fight. In May of 2022, siblings Dallas and Sarah Backer were working at the Princess Bride Diamonds Jewelry, a store owned by their parents in Huntington Beach, California, when 4 robbers attempted a smash and grab. One of the masked thugs used a hammer to shatter a display case as his accomplices came in carrying backpacks. which they were presumably expecting to fill up with jewelry pieces. Dallas quickly charged one of the robbers and landed 2 forceful punches to his head, sending him off balance and falling to the floor. Employee Lily Ochoa ran from behind the counter and joined the melee, pushing one robber outside and repeatedly kicking the one that Dallas had floored. The latter's sister, Sarah, emerged from the back of the store with a stool, which she used to strike the robbers. It was only after the gang had been chased out and the store was locked that Sarah realized she'd been hit in the side of the head with a hammer, but the injury wasn't life-threatening. As footage of the incident went viral, customers and other businesses in the area praised the siblings and Ochoa's tenacity in fighting off the robbers. Number 2. Jaan Harris. Store clerk Jaan Harris was on the job at a Circle K convenience store in Raleigh, North Carolina, when a robbery unfolded in the fall of 2017. The suspect, later identified as 51-year-old William Winston, told Harris that he had a gun, while reportedly pushing and harassing customers. He then tried to flee the store after taking cash and cigarettes, but the employee went after him armed with a baseball bat. She struck Winston in the back of the head and he dropped to the ground. He then rose to his feet, but Harris kept hitting him in the head with the bat and subdued him until law enforcement arrived at the scene. Winston was taken to a local hospital for treatment, after which he was arrested on robbery charges. As shown by his subsequent mugshot, the bat strikes had left him with bloodied lips and a swollen face. As she spoke to the press in the incident's wake, Harris revealed that she still stood by her decision of confronting the robber, even though it had resulted in her losing her job. Circle K fired her for violating the store's safety policy, which, like that of other retailers, prevented employees from engaging in robbers. Number 1. Johnny Noen. On August 3rd of 2022, Johnny Noen was working behind the counter of his Smokestrom Smoke Shop in Las Vegas when 2 men wearing black ski masks walked into the store. Surveillance footage showed the 22-year-old small business owner telling them to take the money but asking them to leave the coins. While doing so, he discreetly grabbed a knife that he kept near the register. One of the robbers then swiped the tip jar and walked out, while his accomplice jumped over the counter and tried to take an item from the shelf. Moments later, Noen charged and started stabbing the suspect repeatedly. He delivered 3 forceful knife strikes to his shoulder, prompting the robber to try and punch his way out of the altercation. Noen then changed the angle of his strikes, progressively stabbing him in the leg, rib section, and then twice in the back. The robber yelled out, "Stop, please, I'm dead," as Noen grabbed him by the neck and dragged him near the exit. While the owner was calling the emergency service, the robber was recorded pleading with him, "Don't let me die, sir," adding, "I'm sorry, this wasn't my idea." Law enforcement revealed that the robbers were in their teens but provided no further update on the condition of the one that Noen had stabbed. In the incident's wake, the business owner claimed that he would further arm himself and also implement a system that would enable him to buzz in prospective customers. Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend the rest of your life in your current job and position, or spend the rest of your life in the house you currently live in? And why? Let us know in the comments section below.